16 minutes past 1 p.m. on Tuesday, the 19th day of March 2019. 19/3/19. And it's 13:16 hours. Your station is Joy 99.7 FM. I am Inshira Ado, and the show is, of course, the Executive Lounge. We bring you the insights of men and women who have blazed the trail and have built admirable and strong portfolios of business and expertise. My guest today is a woman named one of the top 5 women influencing IT in Africa. She's the founder and CEO of Edel Technology Consulting, an IT consulting firm across West Africa and Europe. Recently named IT Consulting Firm of the Year by the telecoms and IT industry, and also founder of the Women in Tech Africa. Now, just in case you didn't know, Women in Tech is a global event that impacts more than 10,000 women globally. The month of March is set aside to celebrate women. Hopefully after that we shall continue celebrating them every single day. But the month of March is really when we spotlight their achievements, encourage them to keep going, allow them more room to thrive, and deliberately make it possible for all of them to contribute and to lead. My guest is Ethel Kofi. You're welcome to the Executive Lounge.
Thank you, Inshira. This has been a long time coming. Yeah?
I know. I mean, it's probably because you're busy jet setting and spreading the gospel of technology across the continent and elsewhere.
No, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you, and especially at a time that there's a focus on technology. We can't deny the fact that it is forever going to be the game changer. It's going to accelerate development. It's going to help lift many out of poverty. And so it's a good time to have this conversation.
Yes, it is.
Let's start off, learn a little bit more about you. Your profile is quite very, very rich, and well done.
Thank you.
So you started Women in Tech, a whole week's event, global event, brought more than 10,000 people from around the world together. What kind of curiosity led you down that path? I mean, what cocoa did you drink that day when you came up with the idea?
I think so. The joke, the joke we have in the office is there's a thin line between stupidity and bravery, and so we cross that line quite often. Mm-hmm. So maybe when I started out, when I went to university to do my degree, I just realized I didn't see any black women that were doing tech. There were a couple of people outside of Ghana, but I didn't really see anybody who looked like me that was in the tech space, and that was always something that bothered me. And then when I moved outside Ghana and worked in technology consulting, I was often the only black woman in the room. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it started out, Women in Tech Africa itself as an organization started out as just for me trying to find other women in the space and trying to grow other women in the space. So the idea was, how can we learn from each other? Mm-hmm. I didn't think of it as the big thing it's become now. So as an organization, we're a network of about 5,000 women across 30 countries.
Wow.
So this is including women of African descent in London, in France, in Ireland, and including on the continent. Mm-hmm. The Women in Tech Week, which is the event you're alluding to, started out as I wanted us to have a flagship event, something that really planted our pole in the ground. Mm-hmm. And I said to the team, I want to do 400 events in 40 countries. And they're like, you're mad. do it. We've not hit 400 events in 40 countries yet, but last year was 15 countries with 40 events. So we're growing.
Oh, you're growing.
We're growing. We're getting there, and over 10,000 women reached. And part of that is it's a festival of technology, festival that is celebrating technology across all the countries. And we're looking at different aspects of technology. We're looking at mobile. We're looking at digital transformation. We're looking at e-government. We're also looking at the things that affect specifically women in the technology field, and how we can entice more young girls to choose technology careers. So I don't know what they put in my cocoa that in the morning, but I thought it was a good idea, and we were on the road to hitting our targets.
Well, it's a brilliant idea, and certainly shaping, the lives of many women in technology, and really showing that it can be done. But I'm intrigued by, the fact that you walked into a space where you felt that there aren't that many that look like me. And instead of saying why, you said, why not? Where did that come from? How did you get that spirit of saying, why not? How did you even start daring to dream that, I belong in that space and many more like me should be there too?
Well, okay, so I think I always have to go and give credit to my parents, right? So I think that when you raise a child and give them the confidence to try out new things and make them feel like they can try out, they can test out, and they are capable, I think it gives them a certain level of confidence. And I think my whole life, I was always taught that I could do it. My dad himself, my dad was, he sort of like, try this, do this, why don't you try this, why don't you, and for a long time, my mother was like, I'm sure you can be running, Google in Africa, even before I started in entrepreneurship. Just like, no, I think, you could be the head of Google in Africa. You have the capability. And so I grew up hearing that sort of thing. And sometimes you fall flat on your face, and then there are times, my dad's always, and I speak to him often, he's always saying, business it's not easy, but you just keep going, and so that's, I think, has helped me on the journey to, trying out and testing out. Not everything we've done has been a success.
Has been a success.
But at least we've been brave enough to try.
Right. Well, if you just tuned in, it's 24 minutes past 1. It's a Tuesday afternoon, which means that we are talking to one of the best minds on the Executive Lounge. Our guest is the CEO and founder of Edel IT Consulting, and she is it's quite interesting. You can join us with your thoughts, comments. Welcome on Facebook Live and also on our WhatsApp platform, which is on 0244 340 and you can also tweet at me at GH Rainmaker. Some very interesting comments already coming through, and we'll be sharing them with Ethel in a moment. But it's good to know that the support was one that came from home. Now, beyond the support you got at home, I mean, home doesn't always go with you into the wild. When you go out there, you're on your own. Yes. What values and what things did you develop that gave you the ability to withstand the shocks and the disappointments, if ever you fell on your face as you went along? Right.
Well, okay, so I'd have to go back to my first big failure, which was SSE. So when my SSE results came out, everybody was disappointed. I didn't, the grades were good enough to get me into university, but was just not what we were expecting as a family. And I remember through that process, just making a decision making a decision that I would never leave anything to chance again. Because I had studied, but I thought I had a bit more time, and leading up to the exam, I'd fallen ill. And so I told myself that I would always be so prepared for anything that came my way, that I would make my own luck. And I think that was a really good lesson in, okay, so whatever I need to do, I need to come prepared. Whatever I need to do, I need to be at least, if not to be at the very top of my game, be so different that I stand out. And that has led, I suppose, on the journey to building brands, building the company, building the network.
Fantastic stuff. I want us to really broaden this conversation. Of course, if we're going to have a lot of women in tech, it means we have to equip a lot of females as they grow. What do you think is missing today in the way we're opening up the study of technology to everyone and specifically to females?
Right. Well, if we start with just looking at our technology curriculum, right? So everyone and their mother is saying that technology is what's going to take us to the next level. Technology is what's going to define the future. All these conversations about technology and digital and how it's going to be the one to leapfrog Africa. Technology is going to change agriculture. Technology is going to change how we do work. And then you hear those wonderful lines, and then you come and look at the curriculum for ICT in Ghana, and then you realize there's a mismatch. There's a mismatch in the training program in which we train from, class 1 to secondary school, right? Because we're teaching them to be consumers rather than creators. So we're teaching people how to use Excel and Word and PowerPoint, and we think that that's a whole curriculum for somebody to have left secondary school, and if they are lucky, which means even if they are in a high tier school, then they are lucky to have access to that training. If they are not, they have no access to the training. So there's a big mismatch in how we're training people. So first of all, we've got to train all our students in how to think, problem solving, algorithms, coding. All those things need to be taught. We can't just tell them how to use technology, which is what our curriculum looks like.
Right.
That's the first thing. And then then when we begin to separate by sort of the boys and girls, you'll find that sometimes the teachers in the classes are clearly saying, oh no, boys are better at math, right? And so we say things to our young girls that make them feel like maybe they might not necessarily be the best suited for these careers. And that also sort of stops the flow. And then also access to internet, access to laptops and computers for people to be able to test out and try. Because the other thing is, there are a couple of national service people that come through every year, and I tell them, you're not competing with the other national service person in Ghana. You're competing with the 15-year-old in San Francisco who's been coding since he was 10 years. Because it's a global market, right? The software you build here, ideally you should be able to sell it anywhere. Whatever technology we build, ideally we should be able to sell it anywhere. We should be able to build our own technology and support the technology we have here. So once we're telling people, we're putting people in a place where they're just consumers, they're not users, and we're not giving them access to internet and data and laptops, then we put ourselves, all of us, at a disadvantage.
Wow. Now that said, would you say we've done enough?
I think we've come far, right? So there's always a conversation about no. I mean, we're still not where we need to get to. But I remember 15 years ago, right, where people did. I don't know whether that still happens now, where people wrote their coding exams on pieces of paper.
Wow.
I mean, really, how do you compete in the world?
You write the code longhand.
That's in an exam.
In an exam.
So it's
so if there's a bug, there's nothing that you've just written it out, and someone has to take their time to go line after line and to mark that.
Thank you. Right. So it just you put your students in a really bad place. So we've come to a place where, one, there are more people. So now, which sometimes is upsetting for me, who has it's sort of been in the industry for a while, where somebody comes out of school and they can literally start a tech company, whether it's web design or mobile app development, right? Because there is momentum, there's internet, people are teaching themselves, where before we didn't have a lot of that. So I can see how, I remember a time where there were 2 software firms in Ghana. True. Right? And now you can throw a stone and you can get somebody to do an app for you and web develop. So we have made progress. We're not where we are supposed to do. We don't have the parity. We don't have enough women in the space. But, compared to 10, 15 years ago, we've definitely come far.
Some might argue that, or rather there's this school of thought that quite a lot of things happen in our space that happens without a concerted effort or a plan that was followed. That maybe there's a wave of this new revolution of technology, and young people and their curious minds and the time on their hands starts dabbling, and then suddenly economies of scale develop, businesses start springing up. Do you think that's a right assertion? And if so or not, what do we need to do so that these things are predictable, that we can actually deliberately create and, well, not necessarily be Silicon Valley, but also be named with some reverence, like India is talked about when it comes to technology?
Right. Okay, so if I understand your question right, you're asking that will this happen automatically or naturally, or do we actually need a plan?
Well, it seems like it has happened automatically. It's like, you know when you go to lie down, but you don't know what moment you actually fell asleep, nor when you woke up.
Right.
And it's like, okay, today we have lots of tech companies around. But did anyone actually deliberately say, we're going to create an environment, we're going to put in A, B, and C that will nurture these things? And that's a school of thought that has just happened on its own. Should we be more deliberate? And what should we be doing about that?
Well, I agree we need to be more deliberate, right? So if you don't know where you're going, you'll never reach your destination. There are a lot of countries, you've mentioned India, and India styled itself to be the outsourced partner of the world. It was a deliberate plan to say we're going to train a lot of people in mathematics. We're going to train a lot of sort of problem solving. We're going to send them out into the global world. So I think of the top, and somebody can correct me, but I think of the top 3 or 4 or 5 sort of tech companies, you've got about half of that being Indians. So it's a deliberate government plan, right? Was to dominate the world, want to be an outsourced partner to the world and to dominate the world. And so you clearly need people who make these decisions to be, to be clear and say, here's where we need to get to as an organization. There are a lot of organizations are trying to do something similar, right? So, for instance, the African Development Bank has a Coding for Employment project, which is 10 million coders within 10 years on the African continent. So that's a plan, right?
That's bold.
That's a bold plan. That's pushing an agenda. Now, that, I think, honestly, from what I read in the World Bank and the African Union, there seems to be an appetite to fund these things and to enable these plans. I genuinely think that our governments, Ghana needs a digital strategy. Ghana needs a digital transformation strategy. We need to sit down and say, here's where we want to get to as a country. Here are the things we need to do in education. Here are the things we need to do in entrepreneurship. Here are the things that we need to do in these various parts in order to achieve that aim, and then begin to execute. Otherwise, we might get lucky. We might get lucky and then, things will align. Just like with telecoms, right? The price drop in telecoms. It was essentially not cheap Nokia phones. It was it's a good combination of cheap Nokia phones and
the birth of Android, right?
And the birth of Android and prepaid, right?
Yeah.
That allowed the boom in mobile. Now, those things can happen. But isn't it better if we're deliberate and intentional about how we can become if it is that the tech talent of the world, because you have to understand that Africa has the youngest population in the world. The average age of Africa is 19 years. And they've got a country like Uganda, which is 16 years.
Yeah.
So in terms of the International Labour Organization and all these UN agencies will tell you that by 2040, almost 35% of the world's working population is going to be of African descent. Now that gives us an opportunity to run the world, essentially to be the talents of the world. Or that will all our people be migrating to Europe?
We won't fit in there anyway because, 2 out of every 5 people would be of African descent, as you say. But that said, there's, I think it's an AFDB sponsored document about the coming demographic dividend. And it's a scary thought that, okay, we're going to have all these people, whether we like it or not, is going to happen. And when it happens, are we today working towards creating a future where these people have something to do, or we're going to end up creating what we no longer will call the Arab Spring, but might become an African Spring, because you'll have too many young people with nothing to do? How do you propose, and I'm recruiting you as a consultant in this my country that I'm running, but step into this space for a moment, that you have been asked to guide us to this promised land.
Right.
What 3 things do you think that governments across the continent ought to do today to own that future?
Right. So, number 1, overhaul your educational institutions.
Overhaul?
Right? Overhaul. Look at the curriculums for science, technology, math, and also arts. Because people forget that arts opens up the mind and helps people innovate and helps people look at different ways of problem solving.
Are you suggesting a liberal,
yes,
educational
liberal
system?
Education. I was very lucky. I got to spend, based on the fellowship that I was on, I got to spend 6 weeks at Yale University. And I tell you what, that education is on a different level. The liberal arts education is a different level of education. It opens up your mind, allows you to think in different ways. We should relook at our curriculums and how we're teaching. First of all, our curriculums were designed to, create workers, and that's fine. But we also have to build problem solvers and creatives, right? That's one side. And then we have to create a culture of innovation and failure. What do I mean by that? You see, culturally, some environments don't allow us to be, do not allow us to be, if you feel, like when I decided to start my business, Ade, why are you doing this? You have a nice job. You're living in London. Why will you come back to Ghana to start a business? What is wrong with you? Right? That was the first level of but the barrier for me. And so when I came and I was having initial problems in the business, I said, we told you. You don't come back to Ghana. Why would you, And so when we don't have a culture where we encourage people to take risks, understanding that, yes, there might be failures, right? And here and let me be very honest with you. When you don't have basics, you can't take risks, right? So when you can't eat, you can't now be thinking, how do we innovate? I recently traveled and I saw coconut where they had done something with the opening, so you could open the coconut like you were opening a can of drink. It's like somebody sat there and decided that they're opening the coconut with a cutlass.
It's too much work.
It's too much work. Let's innovate. But it's after you've eaten. Right? After you've eaten and you have energy, then you can innovate.
So basically, if you're on the brink of survival, there's very little room to create and be innovative.
Yes. If you're hungry, you're not going to start thinking, how do we change how we open coconut? You're not going to do that. You're going to be survivalist, right? You're going to be making sure, how do I get my next meal? So if our basics are not taken care of, you can't now start saying to people, but how different are you from the people in Silicon Valley? You can also innovate when somebody is hungry, right? And here's where I'm always very clear with my story, because I understood when I was I didn't just jump. I took the risk, understanding that when I came back to Ghana, which is why I didn't start the business in London. I was like, if you are broke in London, it's a different story, right? You can't pay your bills, your family is not there. But I understood that when I'm in Ghana and I can't find food, if I go to one of my relatives, I'll get food to eat. I had a roof over my head. So I took a calculated risk, knowing that here are the things, maybe I can no longer take so many risks, go out and go out every night and that sort of thing. You can't do that. But I understood that at least I could get food to eat. At least I had a roof over my head. And so I could take a business risk. I take offense sometimes when people go, no, you can't do it. Everybody can do it. Listen, yes, it does happen, but it is much better. And the statistics show that the people that are more likely to become entrepreneurs are people that are from middle class homes where at least they have food to eat. So if your basics are taken care of, your brain can allow you to begin to look. I mean, just take an example. If you are broke and you have no money in your pocket, the way you act.
It's very different.
It's very different.
Very, 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 very different. Right? I agree.
It's very different from when you have money in your pocket. All of a sudden you see things and like, oh, that would be, maybe I can put this in my living room. You understand? And that's an important part of innovation, that making sure that the basics are available so that people can then be free to sort of, think outside of the box.
Okay, so that's two. What's the third one?
Encourage entrepreneurship.
Okay. So liberal, overhaul the education system, lean towards liberal education, make sure that the basics are available for everyone so they can be more creative, innovate, think outside the box. And the third one is encourage entrepreneurship. So that would mean that you should have tax breaks for people that start companies within the first 5 years. No tax person should come and give you stress while you're trying to figure out your business out. Have programs designed to support entrepreneurs. I like the fact that there's so many hubs in Accra now and across Ghana now, because then you can go to a place where for between 400 or 500 Ghana cedis a month, you can have a nice office that, you can take your clients, you have some internet, and you have a space to at least start your business, right? Those little things that, as a business, one of the big things for businesses in Ghana is rent, right? Especially when somebody's asking for 3 years. Rent is a big deal for anybody, whether right? You want some place to lay your head or start a business.
So all these programs that enable entrepreneurs to access funding, enable entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, enable them to scale, all those things are important, because at the end of the day, if you look at the side, the multinationals hire only a small percentage. Actually, most of the organizations that hire are small and mid-sized companies. Mm-hmm. So we've got to support them to grow so they can hire more.
Wow. So these are your three things. The jury is sort of out on entrepreneurship. A lot of people say it's not for everyone.
No, I agree.
Glad you do. But so you have to have a plan.
Yes.
How did you come to the realization that you were cut for entrepreneurship?
Well, so I have lived. I have a family full of entrepreneurs. So I was lucky in that I could watch the struggles of an entrepreneur. So I had an insight into what it means. My dad's an entrepreneur, my uncles are entrepreneurs. And so I saw the freedom that it gave them, mm-hmm. right? So it meant that my father could come to my school play. Well, sometimes he would forget because he's working, right? But mm-hmm. he would come to, my school events because he had power over his own time. And that also the thing that I absolutely loved about entrepreneurship is just the fact that it's based on your hard work, how much you earn. Mm-hmm. So it's not a set, this is how much you make a year. And and that's great. But I really like the idea that I could make my own, this is how much I will make at the end. I could make my own future in that way. And so for me, it is just watching the people around me and how they navigated entrepreneurship, because I didn't only see the good, I saw the bad. Right? I saw both sides of it. And so that's what made entrepreneurship for me interesting.
You're doing okay, well. you fall sometimes, you rise, but you keep going. And for you, having the inside track has been good. So for people who don't have the inside track, listening to you today, what would you tell them would be one of two things they probably should do to set them on the track to understanding, first of all, if they're cut out to be entrepreneurs?
Right. I always encourage people to have a side gig. A side gig will teach you whether or not you want to be an entrepreneur. I've just finished a book called the $1 Million One Man Business. There's a
please note it down. The $1 Million One Man Business. We're all gonna read it.
Right. It's an interesting book on a trend that's happening in the US right now, which is single solo entrepreneurs are building companies by themselves that are earning up to $1 million.
Wow.
And looking at how they've done it. And so the lady that writes the book looks about 30 or 40 entrepreneurs in the space and what she's learned from them. Right. So we were born in a time where you want a website, you can get it. You can go to, you can get a free website. You can go to WordPress and create a website. Or you can go to a Wix and create a website for free, right? And then we also live in a world with on-demand. So you can go to Fiverr and get somebody to review your documents for $5, £5, right? So we went, and you can set up a mobile app and pay on Amazon, right? 15 years ago, you would have to buy the equipment.
Yeah.
So we now have a space where there's so many things to try out. So you can decide that, okay, here's the thing that's interesting for me. Maybe I want to sell. Always try by selling, right? So I don't know. I want to sell a simple thing online, or I want to sell my professional services. People start with professional service. So maybe I'm a lawyer, or I'm a marketing person. So let me sell my services online with branding.
Yeah.
Go and try it. If after a year, I ask people, do it solidly for a year. Don't leave your job. Do it in between weekends and that sort of thing. Do it, and after a year, even if it's 2 clients you have, it will teach you a lot about what it feels like to run a business. So I always tell people, go and try it out. Go and try and sell something, right? And give it time and document the lessons that you've learned. And also, I like books, so I spend a lot of money on books. Over time, I just buy. All these books on entrepreneurship, and the people that are interesting to me: Jeff Bezos on Amazon, Richard Branson. I've read all their biographies. I've read all the books that I need when I feel like, okay, there's something in my business that needs solving. So, there's a good book for people who are starting. I think it's The Hustle. Is it The Hustle? So it starts with people who are now starting, who are looking to build, a small business, who are looking to dip their toe into it. It's a good book. I think it's The Hustle. It's a good book to help the process. And then the internet is your friend. YouTube, podcast. There's so many people sharing their experiences about how they've done what they've done, right? And so that right now, before where I had the inside track because I have people around me. Now all these people are sharing on YouTube, on in books, on in other places. So you go and get your inside track that way.
You mentioned a very critical thing, which is document the lessons that you pick along the way. What are the lessons for you, like the biggest lesson that you've learned along the journey?
That tomorrow will be better. So when you have an exceptionally hard day, right? And sometimes you do. I've learned that tomorrow, as long as you have life, there is always an opportunity to redo. And and maybe to add to it, I think that I have a lot of young people I mentor, and when I talk to them as they grow their businesses, there is one young man that's in the process of raising venture capital funding. And I've not been paying attention because I've been quite busy. But he's done this thing where he's checked in with me every single time as part of the process. Oh, we went to talk to the the venture capitalist. Oh, this is how much they say they'll put in the business. So he's keeping me in the loop and asking for advice all the time. And I quite like that, and I take that for myself. I'm always looking for people who will give me advice. I think we have somebody we know in common, Cecilia.
Eresi.
I mean, I'm always bugging her, texting her, checking. It took me a year of sort of talking to her to get to a point where it became a formal mentorship relationship. And so somebody, people will say, oh, but I sent an email to this person to mentor me and they didn't mind me. The 2 mentors I have now, it took me a year of begging. It's begging. That's what that was, right? Of proving myself that I was worth their time.
Yeah.
And then they said, okay, you know what? I mean, Cecilia said they're briefly. You know what I mean? Because you had proven yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people look at people that they can learn from and say, oh, but I reached out to them once. Prove to them that
you really want this.
And their time spent in you is valuable, and you would get somebody to handhold.
Yeah. Right, so some comments coming through. Eliza Olympia is watching us on Facebook Live, and she says, you're raising some very salient points. She thinks you're amazing, and I think so too. Now, this message is, the guy didn't add his name, or whoever it is, says, thumbs up for the lady there. I had to resign from my 700 CD job. I guess he's saying 700 CDs a month, because my employer wouldn't allow me to train on part-time. Yet I needed the training to start my electronics business. It's been a struggle. If only the basics could be taken care of, a lot of us could change other people's lives. I guess the lesson in here was that maybe, so in a situation where you need to train, but your work wouldn't allow you, I doubt there's a job that keeps you at work 24/7. So what could have been the missing link in this person's move?
Late nights and weekends.
So he should have reorganized the strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, it's up to, the question is how bad do you want it?
Yeah.
Right, so are you willing to, maybe your Sunday after church relaxation, are you willing to give that up? I'd gone from church, I used to always I'll have the laptop in the car from church, and then I would drive and then go and sit, there's a joint in my area, take the laptop, bring my Wi-Fi and work, because when you go home, I mean, everybody wants to send you. So you don't go home.
The worst of being the young one.
Right? And so you take your laptop and I worked. And so I understand the basic conversation is a serious conversation, but I also have seen people that they want it badly enough to take them. It means maybe waking up an hour earlier to work on your. This is why time is important. People expect something to happen in 3 months. No, give yourself a year.
Put in the time.
Put in the time.
Yeah. So as we get ready to wrap up, I would like your thoughts on this. Rwanda recently started a coding academy for girls. We all appreciate it's important that we focus on creating space for females to thrive. In your own estimation, what will that bring to us as a people if we did that?
So here's my question. So it's this thing is always theoretical until it's your wife or your sister or your daughter, right? So the opportunity for your daughter to become more than she could ever be, right? To become the global tech talent of the world is important to you. But also if you break it down on a countrywide level, listen, the numbers show GDP-wise that the more people are involved in technology, mobile phones, but the higher the GDP of the country. The numbers actually even show with Kenya and M-Pesa that the more people used M-Pesa, that there was a correlation between that and GDP. So the more people we have out there as a country achieving, building, doing, the better for all of us. And I think, and it's a big goal, and people maybe don't understand it, but you have to personalize it. You really have to think about it in terms of if the people in your family, if more people in your family were able to achieve and build and develop, how much more the money in your pocket will be less stressed. So yeah, it's great. I mean, Rwanda is doing amazing. They have parity in government, so they're the country with the
They've
highest.
gone to 68%.
They've got 68% of women in parliament. So clearly they have plan. They have a plan, and they're executing it. And we need a plan.
Absolutely. Conversations like this do have to end at some point. Kwame Doji on Facebook Live sent us a message. He says, it's very important to have a mentor that you need to learn how to be entrepreneurs, invest and create wealth, give opportunities to be an employer than employee. And Timur says that he thinks that the most challenging problem for entrepreneurs in Ghana today is more of corporate governance and not necessarily taxes. People pay their kids' school fees and almost everything from the revenue from the business. They act as experts of all the aspects of the business. No audit, no controls, nothing. Yet we say taxes are the problem. So he's asking, how important is corporate governance for you?
Corporate governance is important, but you see, without sales, without a business, you can sit down, and you can sit down and have all the structures in place, right? And that's, as you grow as a business, that's essential for you to grow. But I'm speaking to the starter, to the one-man business who cannot afford right now to hire 5 people or to hire 10 people or to hire. Yes, when you get to a certain level, you've got to, my thing is outsource accounting. Outsource accounting. That's the first thing you should do when you have your first 2 or 3 clients. You can manage it yourself. You can but beyond 5 clients, outsource your accounting. Get somebody to do the accounting for you. Get somebody to advise you on accounting. And then as you grow, you can add corporate governance. If you bog people down with corporate governance when they can barely make 10,000 Ghana cedis a month, then, what are we achieving?
All right. Well, Ethel, that's all we're going to have time for today. I'd like to say a big thank you for coming. My takeouts from this conversation, number one, is that you must have a plan. And that plan has to be one that you try out so you can gauge how far you can go. Number 2 is that try and look for an inside track. Now, that inside track can be from people around you immediately at home or mentors that you can go and see and get them to help you. Number 3 is you should start by asking why not. Why not? And number 4 is that you should explore. And the exploration is travel the world, read books. The internet is your friend. Use content. And the final thing for me is that when you have started out, always learn the lessons and share them with people. Ethel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The news at 2 is up next. Typically, I would sign you out with a song. I don't know what your favorite song is, but I think Joe Metals Owaweni is a good song to sign off. My name is Inshirado, and I say to you all, go forward, make rain. Shalom. Until next week, take care.